Shalom, shalom, mishpacha wahabarim. It's your girl, it's your sister, 916 Sean Sean on Facebook, Shanti Doc, here with another lesson on this wonderful um, coming into Erev Shabbat. The sun is not quite set over here in Sacramento, California. Um, while the I got the live chat open. I have some guests who are going to be coming in, hopefully. Uh, so I'll just give people a few minutes to come in, and then we'll get this lesson started. All right. So as you see in the title, as you see in the title, um, we have here Yahweh is head of household. Paul and the first century um, household codes. Household codes. This is going to be um, a brief series. It's probably not going to be like less than 3 videos. Hopefully, not more than like 4 or 5. All right. So, with that being said, and this video, going to be giving a brief introduction of what the lesson or the series will cover. Um, Shalom, shalom to Overlord Radical. So yes, we are in for a treat, huh? Okay, that's what's up. So, with the assistance and graciousness of the Most High and the Holy Spirit, the Ruach leading and guiding me into some research, some digging, some delving, deep diving. I ran across some information um, that I looked into a couple to a few years ago, and then more pieces of the puzzle start coming together. And I thank the Most High Yahweh that every grain, every morsel has been put out here. People have been obedient vessels, and we have more references, resources, historical renderings, historical record and documentation that brings out some understanding about the first century AD. Trying to understand Paul and his epistles, trying to understand a lot of the letters. Even though we're in our 20th or 21st century AD culture, and we're trying to have a lot of ideas and ideologies. We try to have these ideas that from the Bible, that give us a good foundational understanding on how to live, how to walk, how to conduct ourselves in this day and age. And so when we read the Bible, when we read the text, we have to remember that the text was, not written in most of our primary languages. It was not written in the 20th or 21st century AD. Dealing with, if historical chronology is correct, we're dealing with a time from 4000 BCE all the way up to first century AD. So, uh, and when we're trying to understand Paul's letters, we cannot superimpose our 21st century AD mindset, ideologies, customs, culture back onto the text and then try to pull from that which we have superimposed on the text. So um, I did a video last week with my brother BA and my sister Yahara. Um, we actually are supposed to be all in this together, but I gotta ride. I gotta ride and get this on out. So with that being said, I'm gonna say Ko Tehelim Ko Kabo Wahati Fedet Le Yahweh Abinu Eloheinu. That is all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, our Father, our Elohim, for this lesson. So I'm gonna be reading a few things and then giving a gist. Um, this this was inspired from this past weekend, learning that an Israelite, a young Israelite woman, was murdered. She was 19 years old. I sent condolences to her family. I believe her name was Luana Sneed, and this took place in Ohio. She was by a fellow Israelite brother she claims to be married to, however, not legally married. And 47 years old, and her life was taken. So I was inspired to do this series and bring out some information, proper context of Paul, the social, political, um, economical climate that was happening. Because what people do, especially some of the brothers who come into the walk and some of the women who, ignorantly follow them, is that they see supposedly Paul telling women they can't teach. They think Paul is saying women can't speak. They're saying Paul is telling a woman to just be subjective and submissive, just blindly to a man, a husband, and do everything he say. They think Paul is saying these things, and if we don't understand the cultural context, if we don't understand the laws of the land, if we don't understand the political dealings, frustrations, and situations that were taking place in first century in Asia Minor and modern day Turkey, where Paul roamed and helped these congregations flourish, then we're going to be lost, and then we're going to try to put our westernized Greco-Roman borrowed mindset back on the text. However, Paul was not a misogynist at all. He was actually against misogyny, and the Most High Yahweh is against misogyny. And I'm going to show that here. Thanks for joining in, Sister Kia. Thanks for joining in. Hope you are edified. Hope you are blessed. Hope you are encouraged. Hope you are uplifted in this lesson. I hope you are just encouraged and blessed to just keep pushing through and keep pushing forward, and hope this information just can keep putting a smile on your everyday life. So head of household, we're going to talk about that. A lot of men say, you know what, woman, I'm the man, and because I have this male reproductive organ called a penis, they believe that because of their gender that they're supposed to lead, that they're supposed to rule, and they're supposed to put in full submission a woman. I've heard the doctrine before say um, women are only good for sex, silence, and submission. And that's far from what Paul or Shaul was reiterating to Gentile nations when they were converting, coming into the fold and into the covenant of Israel through Yeshua the Messiah, or Jesus the Christ. All right, so I'm gonna show from historical record that head of household does not mean leader, ruler, or authority, and head of household is not necessarily male gendered. I'm going to show that it's not a Hebraic foundation that the Most High commanded males to do. I'm going to show that the head of household concept, I'm going to show what it actually is defined as from the first century AD, and I'm going to show that it's a Greco-Roman or Roman implemented thought and system, right? Okay, and so we are Hebrews. We're supposed to be walking in the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh. And we're supposed to be following that which the Most High brought forth from creation. And there was no hierarchy. The Most High created Adam, which is a male and female pair, to subdue and have dominion over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, the animals on the land, and the creeping things that creeped upon the earth. Okay? There was no hierarchy. And what I mean by no hierarchy is, okay, just because this person comes first and they're better than, or this person comes second and then they're less than. The Most High did not set up any of that type of paradigm or model for us to follow and adhere to. He did not set that up. The Most High did set up order or a process. You know, a process has certain steps, but every step or every function of that step is not better than the other. Everything's equally important. Everything has to be everything has to work in a collective unit for one purpose and one common goal, and that is to glorify the Most High as the creator and establish him as king of the kingdom, establish him as father of the household. That's what this is about, father of the household. And so Paul had to use vernacular and language that the first century Gentiles who were coming over into this way, he had to use the language and the idioms and euphemisms that they would understand to get them to understand the ultimate concept that the Most High is the father and we are the children, and the Most High is the estate owner. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to share some things on the screen, and hope you enjoy. Got the live chat open if you want to chat. Hopefully this does not go past an hour and a half. All right. So let's share the screen here. Yeah, let's share that one. All right. So this is a article I downloaded from Chicago Chicago Press. Um, After this, um, you know, I'll if you contact me at my email, I'll see if I can get you a copy. My email is duccndodge1@gmail.com, and it's also in the description box. Okay, so this article here is called Pater Familias, Mater Familias, and the Gendered Semantics of the Roman Household. All right, so I know what you're saying. Like, what is this word paterfamilias? It looks Latin. Yes, it is Latin, and we're going to talk about that, right? Paterfamilias is translated as head of household, right? It's translated as head of household, and we're going to see where this concept came from. I know in our society, we hear the man or the male is supposed to be the head of household all the time, and then just because we hear that terminology or that phrase so much in our cultural upbringing, we think that phrase is in the Bible. In actuality, when I went through the Bible, um, I cannot find where it says man is the head of household, and I cannot find where the Most High commands a male or a husband to lead, rule, or dominate and suppress his wife, right? I cannot find that. If anybody can find that, they can give me. Excuse me. If anybody can find that, I'll give you some money. Whoa, maybe $100. All right, Sister Yahweh, keep trying. Let me send you this. Send you this invite again. Maybe you gotta. Yep. And I know sometimes the Google Hangout is just kind of awkward to get in. You can try to get in from your phone as well. All right. All right. So the person who is responsible for this source, I'm gonna show that to you. His name is Richard P. Soller, right? And you could Google him and look at this. Don't be alarmed. Yes, he's European, right? Who better than to tell of their own history than a European, right? So I'll just make this a little bigger. I'm not going to read all of this here. But Richard Soller, you see that? Stanford University. Stanford University is about 2.5 hours away from me on a good day driving. I've actually been there, and you can actually go into their library. So Richard Soller, He is the Klein-Heinz Family Professor of European Studies at Stanford University. Right. Previously, he was dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences at Stanford, as well as provost and dean of the Social Sciences Division at the University of Chicago. You're in, sis. All right.
Shalom, shalom. Yes, I'm
Shalom.
in.
Shalom. Okay, that's Sister Yahara. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, sis, and I'll get right back into this thing.
All right, Yahara Mera. Shalom, everyone. Hope everybody's getting ready to come into their Shabbat shortly. But I mean, sorry, I've been trying to get in forever. But awesome read, sis. I just wanted to say I'm very interested in what's about to happen right now. So much love and peace to everybody. And let's get it in.
Yeah. All right. So, um, Richard Soller. So, he's a professor, right? This is his background. This is his credentials, right? This is this is his materials that he's written. It'll talk about his works, um, um, that he's contributed over the time of him teaching, studying, and things of that nature, right? So pretty much, in order to be a professor, definitely you got to have a master's or a PhD, right? So some of his publications include the Cambridge Economic History of Greco-Roman World, Patriarchy, Property, and Death in the Roman Family, Personal Patronage under the Early Empire and the Roman Empire, Economy, Society, and Culture, which has been translated into French, Italian, German, Greek, and Spanish, right? So, telling you about these upcoming courses. That's my dog barking. Okay, we'll leave them to bark. Apologize about that. So, these are the courses that actually are that he was involved in and teaches, right? And so these are some of his publications here, and they're actually available for purchase, right? And he is actually the writer of this article here, Paterfamilias, Materfamilias, and the Gender Semantics of the Roman Household. So let's get into it. Let's get into this thing. All right, so I'm only going to be reading the highlighted parts, but please take all of this information back to the Most High Yahweh. Pray, meditate, ask the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you into a sound conclusion, and just keep digging and studying on your own. And I hope this uplifts everyone, men and women. And of course, this is not about men over women. This is not about women over men. This is about restoring proper balance and trying to actually tear off the old man so we can get to the new man, be renewed in our mind, be broken down. We are the clay, the Most High is the potter. We have to, be willingly open to let the Most High Yahweh have his will in our lives, in our hearts, in our spirits, to get to the attitude and mindset he wants us to get to. All right. All right. So,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah. All right. So, few Latin terms come as heavily loaded with conceptual baggage as pater familias. In both scholarly and popular discourse, pater familias, defined as head of household, evokes the patriarchal organization characteristic of the Roman family and of the wider society. Debates over family values in contemporary popular discourse make shorthand and clumsy references to paterfamilias model or to the paterfamilias model of the family or the Roman code of paterfamilias as if everyone understands the content of that model, right? All right, so I'm just gonna give you a gist here, more so read the highlighted information. The real encyclopedia der Klassischen, I think that's Alterm Swish and Saf, includes a long entry on paterfamilias by E. Satchers, who asserts that in the reverence and obedience toward the paterfamilias laid the characteristic foundation for the greatness of ancient Rome. So I'm telling y'all, all through this, you're going to see paterfamilias, head of household, Rome. Paterfamilias, head of household, Rome. That's where you're going to see it at. All right, so the author which he says, Richard P. Soller, he says, I begin by illustrating the common modern understanding of paterfamilias as the severe patriarch whose power defined the Roman family. The most common meaning of paterfamilias is estate owner without reference to familial relations. All right. All right. The Oxford Latin Dictionary offers the following meaning as 4a under pater familias, the head of a family, a householder. Lewis, in short, under familia, gives a more accurate definition: the proprietor of an estate, head of a family. Watch this. And we're going to read some more articles to substantiate this. But like I said, this is going to be a long series where I'm just building up on information. And then we're definitely going to line this up with some text for Paul, right?
And might I add this real quick? I know that I'm
Sure.
a big person of definitely adding in or looking up my definitions. So paterfamilias, when I was actually reading through, I was actually doing they also say like father of the household, so to speak. So father of the household or head of household, they associate that with father. That's what I was looking up a couple of definitions when it came to pater and mater familias. So they're
Right.
referring to specifically the father or the mother of the household as far as mater familias. So these are some of the terminologies that you're definitely going to hear. So you kind of know what association, people know the association with it when I'm saying.
Right. Right. And we'll go over what mater familias means too.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like they're going to mean the same thing because they sound similar. Pater is the Latin and Greek word for father. That's why you have the word for determining who's the father. He takes a paternity test, right? And then mater is the Latin or Greek word for mother. That's why you have, when you go to the hospital, you say, oh, I need to go to, when somebody's having a baby, when the woman's having a baby, they're going to the maternity ward or area, right? So, uh, so to continue with Richard P. Soller here, it says the term, watch this, the term had no necessary association with family as we use the word today, right? F. DuPont's chapter on the family in her daily life in ancient Rome starts in a typical fashion from the pater familias. Quote, family in its Latin sense, familia, covered every member of the household subject to the power of the father of the family. The pater familias, children, slaves, and sometimes, depending on the type of marriage she had contracted, the wife. So in this presentation, the paterfamilias is the authoritative figure whose power over members defines the family, right? So in the presentation that F. DuPont wrote in her daily life in ancient Rome, this, she's giving that definition to the paterfamilias, right? But watch this. The evolutionary myth of Roman society included the stark picture of the simple but virtuous life of early Rome, where the tyrannical paterfamilias reigned supreme over children and wife alike. In the adjective tyrannical, Dixon captures the modern stereotype of the paterfamilias. What do we know? What the stereotype is, right? We know it's commonly said to be severe, authoritarian, oppressive, and rigid. It says, but was this the stereotype held by the Romans themselves? We're going to see that, right? We're just going to see a little bit of this. All right. I know I'm moving fast, but, and then, Sister Yahara, you can step on in like you've been doing anytime. All right. So, the author of this article, Richard Soller, goes in to say, my analysis of paterfamilias in the digest starts from Ulpian's formal definition and then examines how the term was used in many contexts to indicate the paradigmatic property owner, male or female. Right, so you have these historical record documents, digest that would give backdrop information for first century AD. the lands, the culture, the economics, the status, how they went about, their daily life to build up their family, economic situation, agriculture, things of that nature, right? So it's digest. We'll go into more about the digest and OPN in another article, right? So, um, let's see. Let me read this part. It says, I will then argue, following J. Gardner, that this common linguistic practice in legal discourse has two consequences by the use of paterfamilias. Property ownership is superficially gendered as male, and as a result, it is essential to remember, as some historians have not, that female property owners are subsumed in many categorical legal discussions cast in terms of the paterfamilias. All right. Let me just skip here. All right, so to give a crude sense of proportion, paterfamilias appears in the digest about twice as often as in all non-legal classical Latin prose texts combined, and there are two reasons for the ratio. One, paterfamilias was a key legal concept in the Roman law of persons and property, and it is surprisingly uncommon in other genres. So more so, it was a legal concept in Roman law for property, materials owned by the people in the household, such as the wife, depending on what kind of marriage contract she had, the children, and the slaves. All right. The basic legal definition of paterfamilias is a male citizen, sui juris, that is in his own power without a paterfamilias. So when I'm reading some of these Latin words, if they're not defined in this article, I'll define them for you. All right. So central to the legal definition of familia um, is this. It means those under the power of one man, for example, the father of the familia, the mother of the familia, the son of the familia, the daughter of the familia, and those who follow them in turn, for example, grandsons and granddaughters, and so on. Right? The slaves and the estate were part of the potter's familia. The potter's power included several dimensions of authority: his potestas over his children, like his power, right? And his wife, if in manus. Manus is the type of contract where she would be under the authority of her husband if her marriage contract solidified that. And if she did not have a manus marriage contract, there's another name for it. I'm not recollecting off top right now, but that would mean the other type of marriage contract would mean she's still under um, the jurisdiction of her father, right? So the power also included his potestas or dominion over his human cattle, slaves, or servants, and his dominion over the family's property, the materials, right? The material property, right? I'm also going to be reading some more articles, like I said, to substantiate this, but I know I'm going pretty fast as I want to get through this. And, you can go back and um, listen to this video again on your own.
So what I got from this is that, so as I was reading through it, this is more of something that was more of a legalistic when it came to property in the household.
Right.
Hmm.
Legal term. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Legal term.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Okay. So, and that's why, like, when we do our taxes, you either file single, married, or head of household, right? Head of household is more so in our legal term in America. Definitely, it could be a man or a woman, and they would not be married, but um they would be the sole provider for the dependents or the children or the people that they had living in their house, right? So if you were married, you're not to file as head of household, right? Okay, let me continue. And sorry about that. It's the dogs again. All right. So, in legal use, the minimum essential dimension was the third. So the third was what? The paterfamilias's dominion over the family's property, the materials, right? The materials, things, not necessarily the people. But we're going to see later on how things were infused to be included in the word patriarchy, and we're going to properly define that as we go along in this video series. All right, so remember that paterfamilias, head of household, Roman law, Roman invention, right? It is a meaning to solidify the estate owner, somebody who owned the material property. All right. All right, let me read something else real quick here, if I can get to it. Now, from the late 6th century BCE up until the mid 1st century BCE, Rome operated as a republic. Okay, so republic is when the when the states, rule themselves, and they have, people they elect to have their uh to be their representation as a whole, what they want to have, what they want to have done, right? So it operated as a republic from the 6th century BCE to 1st century BCE, and this is the time, right? This is the time. Oh, let me just say this: the republic lasted for 5 centuries, so 500 years, right? And then it transformed into a principate ruled by emperors, and then you have emperor cult, and that's where you're going to see Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar, and all that. So in 450 BCE, there was enacted a Roman law code called 12 tables, and these were the laws written on bronze tablets. And we're going to go to some articles to see more about these, the 12 tables and Roman law code, right? And this idea of paterfamilias, head of household, was in the Roman law of the land. It was a Roman law code, legal. It said the male had ownership of the estate or property, the materials. All right. So watch this. It says fatherhood. Back to this article here. Back to this article here from Richard Soller. Fatherhood was not an essential aspect of a paterfamilias, right? So even um, an adolescent male, if there was no other male in the house and he was the oldest one there, he would be considered the paterfamilias if there was no other male. All right. In many digest passages, paterfamilias is used with all three of the above dimensions of power, right? In the legal discussion of paterfamilias as owner testator, testator, you're going into court cases where you're actually having to look for, excuse me, you're going into court cases where you're having to present that you're the legal property owner. And when somebody dies or whatever, like a will, you have to make sure that the civil authorities, when you go to court, they know who to give the materials or pass the materials on to. Right. All right. So the legal discussion of paterfamilias as owner testator certainly applied to female owners as well. And so when denoting the second dimension of power, paterfamilias as slave owner, the term encompasses women, sui juris, right? What did I say sui juris was? It meant having full social and civil rights. You have the power, you have your own power, your own guardianship, and you manage your own affairs, right? We're going to see some things. And so the women also can be a paterfamilias over and own slaves, because the women who had sui juris, who in the wealthy strata of society undoubtedly had the legal right and did typically own slaves. Um, Sequis, it's a public notice published in the church where a candidate for holy orders resides, right? Um, the phrase sequis and the word service, slave, servant, parent, patronus, a patron, and filius is a child, were explicitly said to include both male and female in legal discourse. All right. Uh, the reason that paterfamilias could not be generally extended to women sui juris is that the first dimension of potestas, meaning power over one's citizens, power over one's citizen children, was sharply gendered in law. What? Roman law, insofar as mothers could not have potestas over their children. But we're going to see something here. Power of the paterfamilias over family members in potestate, found in the legal formula adrogatio, which is the adoption of a citizen sui juris by another citizen. All right. All right. This is another source that Richard Soller is pointing out. He says, as Y. Thomas has persuasively argued, the power of life and death here. Well, let's go back up and read a little bit. Let's see. Let's see. There was a legal act, adrogatio. What is adrogatio? Adoption of an adult. Adoption of an adult, when you're going to adopt not people who were children, but you're going to adopt adults, right? It was regarded as important and unusual, and it was taken before the citizen assembly. Um, let's see. So, in a legal construction, the paterfamilias and materfamilias form the matrimonium iustum, from which legitimate citizen offspring are born in the potestas of the pater, or power of the pater. And so, um, as Y. Thomas has persuasively argued, the phrase where it says the paterfamilias, or head of household, has the power of life and death, that is a legal expression of the outside limit encompassing the whole patria potestas, rather than some sociological reality. All right. What's patria potestas? Um, Paternal power. All right, so this supports the conventional modern stereotype of the tyrannical paterfamilias, but it is essential to remember that the context is an extremely rare legal formula, right? About adopting a full adult and having the power of life and death over them. Pretty much, you own their property, right? All right. Um, Now Augustus, believed between um, 40, what is that, 44 BCE, up until the time he was born. He, set down some legislation, right? And he um, laid down a lot of different crazy laws, especially on adultery in the land. He actually stated in the law of the land, for Roman colonies, cities that were Roman colonies, that men could go around legally committing adultery on their wife, right? So Augustan legislation on adultery, for example, referred to the adulteress's pater, not paterfamilias. So when a woman was caught in adultery, um, you know, they're going to refer to her pater. They're going to refer to her father, not necessarily the husband, or the quote unquote head of household, when it's time to see if she's guilty of what she's being accused of. Right. So paterfamilias in both legal and non-legal discourse has the connotation of the paradigmatic responsible householder and estate owner. And this connotation was developed in Roman law to become an explicit standard of responsibility. Roman law. Roman law. All right. There was a public presence or role associated with the paterfamilias in his exercise of property rights. Right. In a variety of legal discussions, paterfamilias was the paradigmatic home owner or estate owner. All right. Uh, let's see. Wills. So the wills of the well-to-do must often have avoided the tedious listing of every household possession by providing a more general legacy of a domus instructa. A domus instructa is an equipped house, right? Domus is house, instructa is equipped, right? And because in structure equips you or presents you with the tools to do something, or the tools to understand something, right? So Ulpian in the digest said that it encompassed everything in the house by which the paterfamilias was better equipped there. And so again, the paterfamilias figures as the owner and central element of the domus, or the house, right? I'm just going through a little bit of this. I'm not even going to read this whole thing because I got other articles to read, right? All right, so these legal uses of paterfamilias may seem natural enough until one remembers that in all of the above situations, the rules applied to women as well as men, because Roman women had the legal right to own houses, estates, and instrumenta, among which were slaves. All right. So A. Kirschenbaum has written an interesting socio-legal study of how household dependents in the Roman world were employed in situations where modern law has developed the concept of agency. All right, so Kirschenbaum's study uh, massively elides the many female owners in Roman society. And Kirschenbaum very occasionally acknowledges the reality of women owners like Cicero's wife, but the reader is not made aware of the socio-legal fact that in much of the discussion of heads of household and their agents, those heads could equally well be women. And I'm going to show some things to go along with this. Bear with me. The adjectives most often used to describe the paterfamilias are diligence and bonus, less frequently prudence and idoneous, right? So diligence is careful or accurate, and bonus is good, right? So watch this. It is highly probable that the figure of the bonus paterfamilias, and that means good family man or good family father, right? So it's highly probable that the figure of the good family man or good family father was firmly gendered in the Romans' minds. But it is hard to believe that the phrase diligence paterfamilias, or careful, accurate man, right? So it's hard to believe that the phrase careful, accurate man summoned up anything other than a masculine image. And so the tutor, or the instructor, who was held to the standard of diligentia of a paterfamilias, had to be male in classical law. What classical law? Roman classical law. The positive stereotype of responsible estate management was gendered as male already in Republican literature through the phrase bonus or diligence paterfamilias. All right, so that's the positive stereotype of what paterfamilias or head of household means. It means somebody who takes care of what they're responsible for as far as materials. They're very accurate in their estate in their estate management. All right. So in its meaning of let's see this. In its meaning of head of household, it provided a concept that organized much of Roman law about property rights, things, materials. All right. And so, as the figure who exercised potestas, or power over his children, the paterfamilias was emphatically male. But in its barest sense, paterfamilias was used by jurists to denote no more than a property owner, sui juris, and by extension, subsumed female owners. Right? Sui juris, right? It has the person who has full socialist civil rights. They have the capacity to manage their own affairs, right? They're not under the legal disability to act for themselves. All right. All right, let's continue. It seems likely in some cases, in certain in others, that the term was gendered as masculine. So um, that was the part of the article that talked about the examples of paterfamilias and how it was used in legal texts. All right, all right, Sister
And that's
Kirsten.
what this, yeah. And that's what I
Yeah.
was, when I came across that part, I was just like, ah, okay. And I do apologize. I don't want to interrupt. I'm trying to parent and listen and chime in.
Oh yeah, you
So
could.
my apologies. But when I came across that part, I was just like, oh, so it was like a natural default that it was deemed to be a masculine term from the gate. So I was just very like, I was just like, ding ding. Okay, so let's continue to read. So it got really interesting when it came
Right.
to the bottom line of this all kind of pertained to the ownerships of slaves and passing down of property. So
Yeah,
it's
it
yeah.
came down. It came down to the people who were in your house. You owned
Mm-hmm.
everything that they had as material.
Yes. And how
Hmm.
were they able also to, like, say now how it turned into filing taxes, how we file taxes today, what you're claiming under your household as assets, and what kind of tax cuts you get depending on who's in your household and stuff of that nature, or what you own, or a specific classification of what, based on what you have, what kind of tax break you get. So yeah, very interesting.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. All right. So now we're going to look at non-legal usage of paterfamilias. So we're going to look at the use of paterfamilias in certain texts that didn't have anything to do with any um, legalities. Right. So let me share the screen again. Let's go back here. Okay, let's see here. So, all right. Non-legal usage of paterfamilias. So, when a Roman author used the word paterfamilias outside of legal discourse, what social identity was evoked and with what connotations? Elder Cato answered that it was the man who pastures well and sows well. Right, that goes with the diligence paterfamilias, right? And so Cicero focused on estate management in writing that the bonus paterfamilias, or the good family man, was the man experienced in cultivation, building, and keeping accounts. What you just said, right? About keeping count of the assets, making sure that he made righteous investments, 401k, make sure there's an inheritance to be passed on, right? And so, in a similar vein, the younger Pliny wrote to Pompeius Falco that he was riding around and attending to his country estate. And so these three texts, to be a paterfamilias was to be an estate owner and had nothing to do with the exercise of power over family members in our sense. And so the Romans did not use paterfamilias at all in the few texts devoted to familial behavior. And so it is not found in Cicero's or Pliny's epistolary references to family relations as distinct from estate management, right? In the most famous exemplum of paternal severity reported by Valerius, the founder of the Republic, Lucius Brutus, what is that? Brutus laid aside the role of pater so that he could play the part of consul. Consul means governor. Roman authors then did not exploit any supposed connotation of severity or authority in the term paterfamilias in these stories. Dang. I don't know whoever's gonna go back and watch this video or either think about reading this article online realize what they just said. So it says Roman authors then did not exploit any supposed connotation of severity or authority in the term paterfamilias in these stories. Nepo's Life of Atticus, right? Oh, you want to say something, sis? Go ahead.
No, I was just like, yeah, that was meant to be reread. So that was just
Right,
because it breaks open a lot that people aren't ready to hear. But I mean, it needs to be said and put out there. But the information is out there. So
right, and it's
yeah.
been out here. It's been out here. And
Mm,
genuine truth seekers, especially those who come to my channel, putting the blackface quote unquote on it. So
yes.
it'll be easy
Yes.
to digest for them who
Hmm.
are searching this stuff out, right?
And as I always said before, we would be fools to cut ourselves off at the knees when it comes to information. And yeah, so we need to take in account of all things.
Right,
Absolutely, for edification.
right.
Absolutely.
Now we will see later on throughout this series that Augustus Caesar, Octavian, was the adopted son of Julius, um, actually, when he was um, the emperor and declared himself as paterfamilias or head of household of the empire, he actually infused the whole lordship and authority into this term. You know, so but we'll get there when we ready to cross that bridge. So let's go back to the article here. This is good. This is real good. What up, BA? BA. B to the is A. You want the link, BA? If you want the link, I'll send it to you. You can come on in if you want.
Shalom,
Let me
BA.
know. Let me know if you want the link. All right, so let's continue here. It says Nepo's Life of Atticus. The term paterfamilias is reserved for the description of Atticus's responsible estate management. We see that over and over again. And so, in describing Atticus as a bonus paterfamilias or good family man, no less than a good citizen, Nepos meant that he was not extravagant in building or buying, but was able, through careful attention to business, to live in a tasteful domus with a familia of slaves that was optimal in utilitas and forma. So he made that type of person he was explaining that would be a paterfamilias was not frivolous with spending or buying, living within his means, able to um, manage properly the people that he was that were in the household, right? And so the first reference to Atticus's competence as a paterfamilias comes at a point in the narrative before Atticus was married. Okay, you said send it in the Facebook box. Got you. All right, so let me get my boy B to the Izzy up in here. Let's see here. Okay. All right, let me do this real quick, and then we'll get back to reading. All right, so the first reference to Atticus's competence as a paterfamilias comes at a point in the narrative before Atticus was married, right? So guess what? Atticus, before he was married, was called a paterfamilias. So it's not necessarily linked to be a husband, right? Don't we hear that all the time? Oh, the husband is supposed to be the head of the household and all that stuff, right? And as we go through the series, I'm going to reiterate again that head, especially in 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 3, when we get to the absolute first century AD definition, it means source, point of origin, or a beginning, right? Right. Okay, let me continue. Um, Columella, in his work on estate management, used the phrase more frequently than other classical authors. Uh, and like Cato, always in connection with issues of how to farm most effectively, right? So this is agriculture, how to farm, how to take care of your produce, how to raise your food, right? So the De Re Rustica is full of advice on how the attentive paterfamilias can turn a profit by arboriculture, by having the villica or town or state make clothing for herself and other slaves, right? They tell you how to make money off of the things you produce. So paterfamilias, as a state owner on the positive side, carried a sense of solid responsibility, and meant respectable gentleman or man of substance, both financial and moral in that sense, right? So, in the sense of respectable landowners, patres familias was used of foreigners as well as citizens, though in strict law, the prerogatives of the paterfamilias were the preserve of citizens. And so, property ownership and family relations intersected in important ways in Roman society, particularly in the transmission of a patrimony by will. So only uh, only very occasionally is the dimension of the father's authority over family members rather than property dominant in the use of paterfamilias. Watch this. So perhaps the clearest instance of where authority may be a meaning of paterfamilias is found in Phaedrus' story of a paterfamilias who was led to suspect his wife of adultery, killed his own son, which is her stepson, unjustly, and then killed himself. Right? So, somewhat more often, pater familias designates the head of a household with responsibility to protect his wife and children. Okay? So paterfamilias, as the wielder of discipline, more commonly appears in connection with the punishment of slaves, right? And because familia in the classical period had the primary meaning of a body of slaves, not wife or children, the connotations of paterfamilias were elaborated with respect to the relationship of the master to his slaves. All right. Um, Isidorus suggested that the paterfamilias was so called because he treated the slaves of his familia with a father's love. And so, in all of these explicitly reflective male statements, tyrannical and oppressive are not the epithets associated with paterfamilias. Rather, the opposite is the case, right? And so, in the idealized virtue was passed before urban ills, the three dimensions we talked about before of paternal authority over family, slaves, and property came together on a rural estate. All right. You said send it on Google Hangouts. Okay, so let's see. Let's.
So it
No,
seems like
I'm.
to me.
Go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can go ahead and
No,
do that.
no. I'm gonna try to get BA up in here, and you can go and talk. Go ahead.
Okay. So it just seems like to me like this is more of has to do with when they consider slaves to be property, as opposed and the passing down of that property, as opposed to, well, it was obviously misconstrued when it came to ruling over women, so to speak. But it's more of the ownership of that property being able to, I guess, being able to be passed down, or what was considered. I'm trying to gather that. I just had it in my head. Sorry, excuse me. The actual slaves being able to them being able to have property over slaves and how they considered them to be. Um, Goodness gracious. I lost it.
You lost
My
the thought.
apologies.
No, it's all good.
I'm so sorry. I'm sitting up here watching my daughter, trying not to make sure she runs into something. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll get it.
Okay, okay, no problem. All right, let's go back to the article. Let's see here. All right, so E. Satcher's Real Encyclopedia entry on paterfamilias runs to 36 columns, nearly all of which are devoted to a theory of the early development of Roman society in which the authority of the paterfamilias was the key to social order. In my skeptical view, Richard Soller says, the nearly complete absence of contemporary evidence makes such social theories rather speculative. And so, to summarize, the non legal textual evidence, whereas today paterfamilias conjures up the image of a severe patriarchal male head of household, for classical Romans, it brought to mind first and foremost an estate owner. And so, bonus paterfamilias did not mean good father to Roman readers who did not use paterfamilias in their occasional moral discussions of family life. And so Roman family was patriarchal. It was patriarchal in the sense that the husband wife and father child relationships were believed by male authors to be unequal. And so, rather, my argument, Richard Soller says, is that the simple invocation of the paterfamilias as a shorthand description of Roman family values or social behavior can be misleading, right? So, that's that. Before we get into other articles, brother B to the Izzy, shalom, shalom. You want to formally introduce yourself? Say what's up to the people.
Yo, greetings to all. I'm just here to sit back and listen in and learn. Praise the Most High, and I'll keep going, sis.
All right. So, let's see here. What else I got? All right. So we good with timing. I'm not trying to make this too long. I'm not trying to make this too long. All right. Let's do this. Let's go into the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Bible and Gender Studies. And you can actually look this up online. I'm actually looking it up online right now. It's in Google Books. There's no ebook, but they show some examples. And so we're going to look at paterfamilias a little bit more. I brought this out in my head and head covering videos that I did a while back. Uh, that was a 3-part series as well. And it's good to reiterate and go back over this stuff and then add some more, right? So um, I know the title says, Yahweh is the head of household. We're going to talk about first century Paul and the first century household codes. That's what we're going to talk about. So we have to lay a foundation of where head of household came from, and we get it from this word paterfamilias, and we see the definition that we try to put on it as far as our 20th or 21st century AD minds is a Greek and Roman concept. However, that Greek and Roman concept it evolved over some time, and we're going to see who were the major players in that as we go along in the series. All right. So let me share the screen and read this. So again, the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Bible and Gender Studies. See if I can make this. Gonna make my screen a little bigger. Sorry about the dogs. Let's close this door again. We have to get them used to who our neighbors are because they be barking at a bunch of people who walk across the lawn and everything. All right, so let's scooch this over. All right, cool. All right, gonna be starting from right here. It says family and familia. Any investigation of economics and gender must begin with the family, which functioned as the basic social and economic unit in the Roman world. Right? Remember, I said 450 BCE is when this concept of paterfamilias, the male as the head of household, actually females were allowed to be head of household as well. Right? This term was a legal Roman law of the land that got implemented in 450 BCE. Right? Production and commerce were centered on the family, which was also the primary mechanism for transferring wealth and property across generations. So, this idea of family encompassed two interconnected issues. And so, the first issue was a legal definition of family that was based upon the concept of the paterfamilias and its relationship to property rights, the materials, like Sister Yahara said, the assets, right? Paterfamilias is best translated as head of household and described the eldest male in a direct agnatic lineage. And the familia consisted of all the descendants of the paterfamilias, the children, grandchildren, great grandchildren, following a male descent line, right? And that's actually what patriarchy is. Patriarchal says the lineage or descendant is passed through the male, passed from the male to the male. So that's pretty much what patriarchy is in its foundational meaning, right? And so the second issue here, the interconnected issue, was an understanding of family as the unit formed by parents and their children. Authors frequently use the term domus or house to refer to the household or nuclear family, right? The domus or household or nuclear family. You have your the parents, the children, the grandchildren, great grandchildren, so forth and so on. What does this say? Ooh, look at that word. Look at that phrase. Under Roman law, a male paterfamilias possessed complete financial and legal power, patria potestas, over his descendants, the family. It's financial and legal power. This meant that a paterfamilias alone possessed legal ownership over the property held by members of his family. So, Hebrews, if you want to talk about all this head of household stuff and men got to be the head of household and everything's supposed to be under your rule and thumb, including your wife, look at the actual definition we see here from where? From between the 6th century BCE all the way up to 1st century BCE, and then when 1st century AD comes, we're going to see something else infused or tied in with it, right? Check this out. Children, grandchildren, and possibly the wife. Did I say that? Let me say that again. Children, grandchildren, and possibly the wife of the paterfamilias could own nothing, and anything acquired by these individuals became the legal property of the paterfamilias. So anything acquired, the materials, the tangible things, right? Watch this. When a paterfamilias died, each of his sons and quite possibly his daughters became a paterfamilias in his or her own right. Social custom dictated that all children, including daughters, should inherit on an equal or near equal basis. The Roman economy swelled during the military expansion of the Republican era. What did I say? From the 6th century BCE all the way up to what? 1st century BCE. And the increasing amount of wealth and complexity of commercial transactions made this system of property ownership increasingly cumbersome and inefficient. Accordingly, Roman law developed the peculium as a means to mitigate the situation. The peculium was a fund granted by the paterfamilias to someone in his potestas, someone in his power, like a daughter, a daughter, um, Let me get up there. A daughter, a grandson, or a slave to manage as his or her own money in order to pay for life expenses. The individual treated this money as his or her own, but it remained the legal property of the paterfamilias, and it was revocable at any time. It could be revoked at any time. In a landmark study on life expectancy, Richard Soller, from the author of the article we just read, right, added a new wrinkle to our understanding of the paterfamilias and the economic landscape of ancient Rome. That's why I read that article first. You see, these two or three witnesses all lining up together. Combining data from funerary monuments, comparative demographic information, and a very sophisticated computer modeling program, he, Richard Soller, determined that the relatively short life expectancy in the Roman world meant that most adults would not have been in the power of a paterfamilias. Um, Using the most optimistic assumptions, his model shows that more than 25% of all Roman children would have lost their father by the age of 15. Nearly 50% would have lost their father by 25, and 80% would have lost their father by the age of 40. These these percentages are based on the most generous assumptions about life expectancy. The actual percentages of Romans without a living father were almost certainly even higher. Now I'm going to read this section too about the rights of women because it goes into more about this paterfamilias. This is good. Roman women possessed greater property rights and economic agency than women in nearly any other pre modern society. They could own land and possessions, form contracts, and conduct financial transactions. All right. Roman law protected the assets of married women, requiring that they be held independently from those of their husbands. So this was especially important because the social expectations regarding equal distribution of patrimonies meant that women had a realistic opportunity to acquire wealth. Upon the death of her father or her husband, if she was under his potestas, if she was under his power, a woman would become independent sura juris. She can have all social and civil rights to manage her own affairs, right? And a paterfamilias in her own right. Let me say that again. Upon the death of her father, a woman would become independent and a paterfamilias in her own right. She could become a head of household in her own right. Yeah. Finally, Roman women possessed the right to make wills and control the distribution of their assets after their death. There were some constraints placed upon the property rights of women, most notably that they needed a guardian tutor to approve major financial transactions for their entire lives. So this condition was more restrictive than that for men um, who needed a tutor only until the age of 14, and then were under a limited financial guardianship cura until the age of 25. So a paterfamilias might name a tutor for a dependent in his will, or in cases where he died intestate, a magistrate would appoint an individual until the first century AD or CE, usually the closest male agnate. And so women were generally not eligible to serve as guardians themselves, although in the imperial era, exceptions were sometimes made in cases involving a mother and child, right? Uh, let's see here. Let's go down here. Roman women possess no direct political rights, meaning that they cannot vote in elections, hold political office, or serve on juries. Women were allowed to make public speeches in a law court, but only if they were personally involved in a case. And so, nonetheless, the ability to own property gave women the means to influence affairs or enact civic change. There are many examples of women exercising de facto or absolute political power through men, often their male relatives, and using their own resources to enact civic change. All right. Let's see. Do I want to read this? No, I don't. But if you want to go back and read this, you can read on marriage and divorce. Start here, and then it actually gives um, some more information about paterfamilias. All right. Let's see. All right. I'm reading a lot of information, but this is just to set the stage for where we're going to go to in this series. All right. All right. Any questions before I continue? Any comments, concerns before I continue with two more brief articles? Nope. All right. So give me 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. Thank you to those who are watching now and those who will watch later. All right. All right. So remember when I was talking before about the Roman law code called 12 tables, right? And so these were the laws written on bronze tablets, right? Let's see. Let's close that. Let's close that before I go any further. All right. Let's see here. Which one do I want to get into first? Sources of law, 12 tables, practicalities, inclusion. I'm making sure I pull up everything I want to read first and then everything I want to read second. Okay, cool. So this is what I want to read first. I believe this is what I want to read first. Let me see. Yep. All right, so let's share the screen. Good timing, good timing. All right, so this is an article by Donald Wasson. It's called Ancient Roman Family Life. www.ancient.eu/article/870/ancient Roman family life. Let me just expand this real quick. Make that bigger. All right, so Donald Wasson. Okay. So, about the author of this article here, Donald Watson taught ancient, medieval, and U.S. history at Lincoln College. Right, has always been and will always be a student of history ever since learning about Alexander the Great. So, these are credible sources. You know, they're writing these articles. So, let's scroll back up here. Let's talk a little bit. So, whether there was a king, a consul, governor, or an emperor that stood supreme over Rome and its territories, the one constant throughout Roman history was the family. And like many earlier societies, the family was the fundamental social unit in the eternal city, and at its head was the father, or if there were no father, the eldest living male. The Latin expression for this is paterfamilias. One historian noted that the Roman family, in fact, reflected the principles that would shape Rome's republican values. So over here in America, these Hebrews talking about they the head of this and they the head of that. Okay. Absolute paternal power says to a Roman male, his family was more than just his wife and children. It determined both his social standing and personal worth. And throughout this series, we're going to talk about um, the social status of patronage and client, honor versus shame, things of that nature. In that society, you were not somebody unless somebody else thought highly of you or had an opinion of you. Um, but we'll get into that later as we go along. So his home or domus established his reputation or his dignity, and under Roman law, the father possessed absolute paternal power, patria potestas, not only over his wife and children, but also his children's children and even his slaves. In fact, anyone who lived under his roof, right? So we understood by reading the initial article from Richard Soller about pater familias, mater familias, and the gender semantics of the roles. We understand what a pater familias is also from the Oxford Encyclopedia, right? But watch this. By law, this is kind of crazy. By law, a father could even beat his adult son, although this may have never been done. As a paterfamilias, dang, a father's lineage, right? His ancestry was of the utmost importance, defining his position in the social hierarchy. So, in Rome, in the Roman colonial lands, where Paul went to. You have Corinth, you have Galatia, you have Rome, of course, you have Colossae, you have Thessalonica. These are Roman colonial lands. They are um, controlled by Rome, and they have to adhere to the laws of the land. And then one of the laws of the land, they have social hierarchy. And this is why I say the Most High Yahweh did not create a hierarchy in where you got this person who comes first, this person who comes second, this person who comes third. Everybody who's lower than somebody else is inferior. No, the Most High did not create an inferiority in His house, in His kingdom. Right? He did not create a hierarchy in that sense. Roman law did. Roman law created that social hierarchy. You go back and look at Commander Curse Part 2, Genesis 1, 2, and 3 Reloaded, and you'll see the established foundation from Genesis 1, 2, and 3, or especially chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. All right? So let me continue with this. Let's see. I don't want to read that part. You can go back and read this article. I'm not going to read all of it, but this is just to provoke you to go back and look at this article thoroughly, examine it. I'm just, citing my sources, right? Women's status. It is evident that women were not generally held in high regard in Rome, and they were married at an early age to a man they may or may not have loved. Sometimes they were married off as teenagers, 14, 15, sometimes to a man who was 10 years plus older than her, right? Although they could inherit property from their father's estate, they had little in the way of identity. Indeed, most were almost nameless. Um, while considered by law to be citizens, they could not hold public office or vote. Right. However, unlike a woman, I'm down here now. However, unlike a woman in Greek and Near Eastern society, a woman in Rome could appear with her husband in public, although public displays of affection were forbidden. I would be in trouble if I was in Rome. I, boy, they throw me under the Roman jail. But um, I'm just gonna keep reading. Her duty, besides to provide children, was to be head of the household, for which role she held the keys to the house. Let me say that again. Her duty, besides to provide children, was to be head of the household, for which role she held the keys to the house. And I know people are like, Shanti, how can the woman be head of household? Well, I'm gonna take this lesson out with a bang. I'm gonna read some passages. One passage from Paul's letter, and then I'm gonna read another passage from Paul's letter. But um, She oversaw cooking and clothing production, both spinning and weaving, as well as supervised domestic servants. And she controlled the economic affairs of the home and, if necessary, helped in her husband's shop. A wife could even dine at the same table with her husband much later. As the role of a woman changed over time, she could become a pharmacist, a baker, and even a doctor. All right. So let's go over here. This is let's go down here to the author. Citing my sources, showing this is a credible historian. So Mark Cartwright, um, history writer based in Italy. What if we're going to talk about Rome? It'd be suitable for a history writer of Rome to come out of Italy, right? His special interests include pottery, architecture, world mythology, and discovering the ideas that all civilizations share in common. He holds an MA in political philosophy and is the publishing director at AHE. Um, what's that? Ancient history. Um, this site here, this main site that I'm looking at. So let's go to the top. Roman law. See, we keep talking about Roman law. We keep circling back to Rome. Roman law, as revealed through ancient legal texts, literature, papyri, wax tablets, and inscriptions, covered such facets of everyday Roman life as crime and punishment, land and property ownership, commerce, the maritime and agricultural industries, citizenship, sexuality and prostitution, slavery and manumission, local and state politics, liability and damage to property, and the preservation of the peace. Law. Right? All right. Um, what did I want to read out of here? Let's see. So remember when I was talking about the digest when I was reading from the article from Richard Soller, historical sources says one of the most important sources on Roman law is the Corpus Juris Civilis, compiled under the auspices of Justinian the First and covering civil law. And one of its four books, the massive digest, remember the digest covers all aspects of public and private law. The digest, it was produced in 533 AD or CE under the supervision of Tribonian, and is an overview of some 2,000 separate legal volumes. These original sources were written by noted jurists or legal experts such as Gaius Ulpian, who Richard Soller referenced, and Paul, and they make the digest one of the richest texts surviving from antiquity, as within there is a treasure trove of incidental historical information used to illustrate the various points of law, ranging from life expectancy to tax figures, right? So Paul was a jurist or a legal expert. Yes, he was. He was an expert in oral law, and he was an expert in written law or Torah law. And yes, that's the Paul we're talking about. Is famous for the epistles, apostle to the Gentiles, right? So if you look over here to the right, what I say, paterfamilias, that concept came when 450 BCE, and they're encoded here where the laws of the 12 tables, the basis of Roman laws, are compiled, right? So, um, sources of law. I'm gonna skip down, just down to here. So it says, how am I on timing? Okay. I'm going a few minutes over what I wanted to do, but that's okay. In tradition, the first source of Roman law was the 12 Tables, which survives only as citations in later sources, right? Um, Following an initiative to collect in one place the civil laws of the early republic, and in the exclusive domination of matters of law by the priestly and patrician class, laws governing relationships between citizens were codified and separated from sacred law. There's a difference between secular law and then your religious sacred law, right? This document was actually a collection of sentences concerning the rights of citizens only, as all other parties came under the legal jurisdiction of the male head of the family, paterfamilias, who had considerable freedom in his treatment of those in his care, both free and unfree. Right? So it's good to continue. I'm not going to right now, but it's good for you to continue. Those who are watching now and those who will watch later, read this article about these 12 tables about Roman law, you know, about the republic that they formed and how they went from a republic or how they went from a republic, a monarchy, to emperor, the emperor taking over, and imperial cult worship coming after that. All right. Let's see. Did this also talk about the women? Eh, it probably did, but this is a lot to cover, so I'm not going to bring it out. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns before I bring up some text here from the Bible? The Bible. You still with us, BA? You still with us, Yahara?
Present.
All right. Brother BA might have checked out. It's a hard-working man right there.
Yes, he is.
Did,
Question. So I have a question because we know how when women are married off, like when girls are born into the family and women are married off at a young age, they marry into another family. What are your thoughts when marrying into another family as a young lady, and say that father has that property he wants to pass on within that family, and that daughter getting married off into another family, so to speak?
okay, so are you talking about in our culture here in America, 21st century AD, or are you talking about first century AD?
First century AD, back
So
then.
so what are my thoughts,
Yeah.
or what are my
As
thoughts
far
on
as,
this
as far as
information that just
yeah,
brought out? I mean, because
yeah, with the information being brought out, and then back then also being married off as a young lady into another family versus, and the dad passing down his inheritance, so to speak, since this is a more of a legal aspect
okay,
to thing
okay,
that's
rephrase your question, or you just want my thoughts on what I see
yeah,
here
yeah,
as what's in their Roman law.
yes. So okay, so you have a young lady, because we're everything that's coming out, we're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing that as far as partus familias and mater familias with husband and wife, we're seeing the legal aspects of everything come out, as far as the ownership of property, the and then basically keeping it in the family. So when you have a young lady that's say the father wants to pass on properties to keep it in the family, when a young lady is married off, and you know how I am with scatterbrained and everything like that, but when a young lady is married off into, and she goes into another family, does she still have the rights to her father's inheritance?
If that's in the contract, um, yeah. But if not, no. It depended upon her marriage contract. That's what it said. If she was under a manus, manus. If she was under a manus marital contract, she's under the total authority or total legality as far as Roman law is concerned of um, the husband. If she did not have a manus marriage contract, she's under um, the hand of her father.
Gotcha.
So, mhm, okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Oh yeah. I probably didn't explain it all the way thoroughly, you know what I mean? But
No,
these
I got
things,
the gist of it. I
these
got the gist of
particulars
it.
and intricacies are like just like okay. Um, let's see. Did I hear BA say something, or he totally checked out?
I think he might have checked out.
All right. I'm not going to be too much longer. Let me read First Timothy chapter 5, verse 14. I'm going to read it from the scriptures ISR here. It says, so I resolved that the younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house, giving no occasion to the adversary for reviling. All right, so you know what? This, okay.
Still there, sis? Yay?
All right, BA, is that you? That's you. I think it was something with. I think it was something. Maybe that was YouTube. Maybe that was YouTube. All right. Okay. So I think that was YouTube or something. I don't know. But okay, yeah, definitely definitely odd. Definitely odd. Um okay, it kicked Sister Yahara out. Okay, so let me finish this out while YouTube is doing its thing. Since I have it back up because my internet didn't go down. Um okay. All right. So that means I need to hurry up and finish. Okay, so I was at First Timothy chapter 5 verse 14. I was reading um here. Okay. I'm going to share that and then I'm going to share this. I think it may be I think it may be my pictures. I think it may be the pictures or something when I'm trying to share the pictures. I think that's maybe what it is. Not too sure. Okay. All right, but this is hmm. So it looks like I'm frozen again. Frozen again. All right. Okay, well, this is what we'll do. This is definitely what we'll do. Cut the video. We'll pick it back up in part two of Yahweh's head of household, Paul in first century household codes. We'll